The space station called Axiom Prime floated in the darkness between stars, and it was the largest structure any species had ever built in the known galaxy, serving as a meeting place for hundreds of alien civilizations who had agreed long ago to settle their problems with words instead of weapons. Ambassador Vethela of the Corvani hegemony stood at the window of his private chamber and watched the ships arrive, one after another, filling the docking rings until no space remained. And he felt a deep unease in his four hearts that he could not explain to anyone around him. The Galactic Concord had kept peace for 11,000 years, and Vethel had spent his entire career believing that this peace would last forever. But now everything was changing because of a species that had only discovered faster than light travel 200 years ago. Humans, they called themselves. Vethal remembered the first reports about them. And back then, everyone had laughed at the strange creatures from a small blue planet on the edge of nowhere, calling them primitives who would take centuries to become relevant in galactic affairs. But nobody was laughing now. The door behind him slid open and High Arbiter Tethramon entered the room, his insectoid body clicking softly against the metal floor as he moved with the careful grace of someone who had lived for 300 years and seen empires rise and fall. "The human delegation will arrive within the hour," Tethramon announced, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood that this meeting would decide the fate of countless worlds. "Are you worried?" Bethal asked without turning from the window. "I have mediated disputes between species that wanted to destroy each other completely," the High Arbiter replied. "But I have never dealt with humans before, and everything I have heard about them makes me nervous in ways I cannot describe." Bethel finally turned to face his old friend and colleague, and he could see the tension in Tethramon's ancient eyes, a fear that matched his own. "Tell me again what happened with the Dreveth," Bethel said, though he had read the reports 100 times already. Tethramon's wings buzzed slightly, a sign of discomfort among his species. The humans had settled on several worlds in a region the Dreveth Imperium claimed as their own. And when the Dreveth demanded that the humans leave, the humans refused and said they had found those worlds empty and had every right to stay. And then, the Dreveth sent a fleet to the human colony on New Brisbane, expecting the humans to surrender when they saw the size of the force against them, but the humans did not surrender. Vethal nodded slowly because he knew what came next. The Dreveth commander decided to make an example of the colony, and he ordered his ships to fire on the cities below, destroying 3 major population centers and killing 14 million humans, including 4 million children. The number still shocked Vethal, even though he had heard it many times, and he wondered how any species could recover from such a loss. The Dreveth expected the humans to beg for peace after that. Tethramon continued, but instead something happened that nobody predicted. The humans attacked. Not just attacked, the High Arbiter corrected. They came with a fury that the Dreveth had never seen from any enemy. And in 18 days, the humans destroyed 3 fortress worlds that had stood for thousands of years, killing millions of Dreveth soldiers and showing no mercy to anyone who resisted. Vethal walked to his desk and picked up a data tablet that showed images of the destroyed Dreveth fortresses, once mighty structures that had terrified entire sectors of the galaxy, now reduced to burning rubble floating in space. "How did they do it so quickly?" he asked. "Nobody knows for certain," Tethramon admitted. "But our intelligence officers believe the humans had been preparing for war since the moment they entered the galaxy, building ships and weapons in secret while pretending to be peaceful traders and helpful engineers. And now they want more." The High Arbiter shook his head slowly. "That is what frightens me most, Ambassador, because the humans have not made any demands. They have not claimed any new territory, and they have not threatened anyone except the Dreveth." "Then why are we here?" Vethel asked. because the Dreveth are members of the Concord, and they have demanded that we punish the humans for their aggression. And because many other species are afraid that if we do not stop the humans now, there will be no stopping them later. Vethal set down the tablet and stared at the ceiling for a long moment, thinking about everything he knew about humans and realizing how little that actually was. Other species in the galaxy were predictable in certain ways, and you could understand what they wanted and what they feared. The humans seemed different, and the reports about them contained so many contradictions that Vethel could not build a clear picture in his mind. Humans were described as kind and generous, always ready to help strangers and share their knowledge freely. But they were also described as violent and stubborn, refusing to back down from any fight even when the odds were against them. Humans built hospitals on alien worlds and saved lives with their advanced medical technology. But they also built warships that could destroy entire fleets in hours. Humans made friends everywhere they went, and alien species often said that having a human friend was the greatest gift the galaxy could offer. But humans also made enemies, and those enemies rarely survived for long. What are they really like? Veth-Al asked quietly. Tethraman moved closer and lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. I spoke with a Corvani trader who worked with humans for 20 years, and I asked him the same question, and do you know what he told me? What? He said that humans are the only species in the galaxy who will die for a stranger. And he said that humans believe in something they call justice, and they will sacrifice everything, including their own lives, to protect that belief. Vethel felt a chill run through his body. And what happens when someone violates their sense of justice? The High Arbiter's compound eyes seemed to darken. Then the humans become something else entirely. And the trader told me that he had seen it once. And he said it was the most terrifying thing he had ever witnessed. And he prayed to every god he knew that he would never see it again. A soft chime echoed through the room, indicating that the human ships had entered the station's sensor range. Veth-Al straightened his robes and prepared to greet the delegation that would decide the future of the galaxy. Let us hope that we can give them what they want, he said. Tethraman said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than any words could have. Admiral Helena Vasquez walked through the golden corridors of Axiom, Prime with the kind of calm that made every alien who saw her feel deeply uncomfortable. And her boots made soft sounds against the polished floor, while her eyes moved constantly, watching everything around her. She was not a tall woman by human standards, but she carried herself like someone who had faced death many times and had stopped being afraid of it long ago. And the medals on her uniform told stories of battles that most species did not want to hear. Behind her walked Secretary of Interstellar Affairs Marcus Chen, a man whose gentle face hid a mind as sharp as any blade. And he smiled politely at every alien they passed, but his smile never reached his eyes. 12 aides followed them, all of them selected for this mission, because they could remain calm under any pressure. And they walked in perfect formation, their movements smooth and confident. The aliens watched from alcoves and balconies above, and whispers filled the air like the buzzing of insects, and Admiral Vasquez heard fragments of their conversations as she passed. Look at their eyes, a Corvani merchant said to his companion. They have the eyes of predators, always watching, always hunting. They do not hibernate during space travel, another alien whispered. They stay awake the entire time, and nobody knows what they think about during those long journeys between stars. I heard that they can eat almost anything, a third voice added. Plants, animals, things that would kill any other species, and they consider it normal. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile at that last comment because it was true, and humans could indeed survive on foods that would poison most alien species. Secretary Chun leaned closer to her as they walked. They are afraid of us, he said quietly. Good, Vasquez replied. Fear might keep them honest. They reached the central chamber where the meeting would take place. and the doors slid open to reveal a massive room filled with representatives from hundreds of species, all of them waiting to see what the humans would do. High Arbiter Tethraman stood at the center of the room on a raised platform, and he spread his arms wide in a gesture of welcome. Admiral Vasquez, Secretary Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Concord, I welcome you to Axiom Prime and thank you for agreeing to these peace talks. Vasquez walked to the seats prepared for the human delegation and remained standing while her aides took their positions around her. We are here to listen, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, and we hope that the Concord is something worth hearing. A ripple of discomfort passed through the assembled delegates because humans were supposed to be grateful for this invitation, not acting like they were doing the Concord a favor by attending. Ambassador Vethel stepped forward and activated a holographic display that showed a map of the disputed territories, and small lights indicated the systems where humans had clashed with the Draveth. Admiral, Secretary, the Concord has spent many weeks preparing terms that we believe will bring lasting peace between humanity and the Draveth Imperium. He gestured at the map and highlighted 11 star systems. First, humanity will withdraw from these 11 systems, which the Draveth claim as part of their historical territory. Marcus Chen raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Second, humanity will pay reparations to the Draveth for the destruction of their 3 fortress worlds, with the exact amount to be determined by a Concord committee. Third, humanity will submit to Concord oversight of all future military expansion, meaning that any new human colony must be approved by a majority vote of Concord members. Admiral Vasquez listened without any change in her expression, and nobody could tell what she was thinking. In exchange for these concessions, Bethel continued, the Draveth will cease all hostilities against human worlds and will return any human prisoners currently held in their facilities. The chamber fell silent as everyone waited for the human response. Vasquez looked at Secretary Chun, and something passed between them that no alien could read. A conversation conducted entirely through subtle movements of their faces that meant nothing to anyone else. Then she turned back to the assembly. How many prisoners? She asked. Vethal checked his data tablet. Approximately 2,000 humans were captured during the conflict, and the Draveth have agreed to return all of them. And the 14 million who died at New Brisbane? Chun asked softly. The chamber became very still. I am sorry, Vethal said. 14 million humans were killed when the Draveth attacked our colony, Chun continued, his voice remaining calm and steady. And 4 million of them were children who had done nothing wrong except live on a world that the Draveth wanted. The situation at New Brisbane was regrettable. High Arbiter Tethraman interrupted. But the Draveth were acting within their rights under Concord law, and we cannot hold them accountable for enforcing their territorial claims. You cannot hold them accountable, Vasquez repeated slowly. The Concord has maintained peace for 11,000 years by allowing member species to handle internal disputes according to their own traditions, Tethraman explained. And if we began prosecuting every border conflict, the coalition would fall apart within a generation. Secretary Chun leaned forward. So you are saying that the murder of 14 million innocent people, including 4 million children, is simply the cost of doing business in your galaxy? We are saying that peace requires compromise, Ambassador Vethel said. And surely humanity understands that some sacrifices must be made to prevent greater bloodshed. Admiral Vasquez stood completely still for a long moment, and the delegates nearest to her could see something changing in her eyes, a coldness settling over her like frost spreading across glass. The Draveth commander who ordered the attack on New Brisbane, she said. Where is he now? Vethel hesitated before answering. Commander Krathvalum was promoted to Grand Admiral after his successful enforcement action, and he currently commands the Draveth's primary battle fleet. Promoted, Vasquez said. Yes, For killing children. For defending Draveth territory? Tethraman corrected gently. And we understand that humanity sees the situation differently. But the Concord cannot impose human values on species that have their own ancient traditions. Secretary Chun stood up slowly, and his movement drew every eye in the chamber. So let me make sure I understand your offer correctly, he said. You want us to abandon 11 worlds that we built with our own hands, pay money to the species that murdered our people, and accept restrictions on our freedom that no other species has ever accepted. And in exchange, we get back 2,000 prisoners and a promise that the Dreveth will stop attacking us for now. That is a fair summary, Bethel confirmed. And we believe these terms are generous, considering the damage humanity has done to the Dreveth. Admiral Vasquez turned to look at her secretary, and again that silent communication passed between them. And this time, some of the aliens thought they could almost understand what was being said. Chun nodded once, very slightly. Vasquez turned back to face the assembly, and when she spoke, her voice was so calm that it terrified everyone who heard it. No, the single word hung in the air like a knife. The Terran Republic rejects these terms completely. And then she turned and walked toward the exit, and her delegation followed without hesitation, leaving the chamber in stunned silence behind them. The chamber erupted into chaos the moment Admiral Vasquez spoke that single word, and hundreds of voices shouted questions and demands while delegates rose from their seats in panic. High Arbiter Tethraman's wings buzzed loudly as he tried to restore order, but his voice was lost in the noise. Admiral Vasquez, please wait. Ambassador Bethel as he rushed toward the human delegation. You cannot simply reject these terms without discussion. The entire Concord stands behind this agreement. Vasquez stopped at the door and turned to face him, and her eyes were cold like the space between stars. Then the entire Concord is complicit in the murder of our people, she said. The words hit Bethel like a physical blow, and he stumbled backward as if she had struck him. You do not understand, he said desperately. If you reject peace, you will be at war with every species in this chamber. And humanity cannot survive against the combined might of 347 civilizations. Secretary Chun stepped forward with that gentle smile still on his face. But now everyone could see that the smile was dangerous. Ambassador, let me tell you a story about humans, he said. A long time ago, before we ever left our home planet, we had many wars among ourselves, and in one of those wars, a small nation faced invasion by a much larger enemy. I do not see how this is relevant, Bethel said. The invading army was certain they would win because they had more soldiers and more weapons and more resources, and everyone expected the small nation to surrender because the numbers were impossible. Chum paused and looked around the chamber at all the alien faces watching him. But the people of that small nation refused to give up, and they fought with everything they had. And they burned their own cities rather than let the enemy take them. And they died in numbers that should have broken their spirits completely. What happened? Someone in the crowd asked. They won, Chum said simply, not because they were stronger, but because they would not stop fighting no matter what the cost. And eventually, the invaders realized that victory would cost them more than they were willing to pay. The chamber had grown quiet as the aliens listened to this strange human history. You think the Concord will give up? A Dreveth commander shouted from across the room, his scales rippling with anger. We have destroyed empires that were 1,000 times your size. Admiral Vasquez fixed him with her stare. And how many of those empires were willing to die rather than submit? She asked. The Dreveth had no answer. Humanity has existed for 300,000 years, Vasquez continued. And in all that time, we have never been conquered, never been enslaved, never been broken. Because we would rather cease to exist than live on our knees. High Arbiter Tethraman, pushed through the crowd to stand before the human admiral. "Admiral Vasquez, I beg you to reconsider," he said. And for the first time, his ancient voice trembled with genuine fear. "The Concord does not want war with humanity, and we only wish to find a peaceful solution that allows all species to coexist." "Then punish the Draveth for what they did," Vasquez replied. "We cannot do that. Then we have nothing more to discuss." She turned again toward the door, but Tetherman reached out and caught her arm, a gesture that made every human in the room tense with sudden alertness. "You would make war against the entire galaxy?" he asked. Vasquez looked down at his hand on her arm, and something in her expression made him release her immediately. "No," she said quietly. "We will simply stop making peace." Nobody understood what she meant, but the words sent a chill through the chamber. "What does that mean?" Ambassador Vethel demanded. Secretary Chun answered for her. "It means that humanity will no longer participate in the Concord's version of galactic society, and we will withdraw all our people from non-human worlds. And we will end all trade agreements and joint projects and cooperative arrangements." "You cannot do that," a Corvani delegate shouted. "Watch us," Vasquez said. "But humans are everywhere," another voice cried out. "You work on our stations and our ships and our colonies. You provide medical care and engineering support and trade goods that we depend on. Then you should have treated us better," Chun said, and his voice was finally showing anger beneath the calm surface. The Dreveth commander pushed forward through the crowd, his claws extended. "This is ridiculous," he snarled. "You are threatening us with withdrawal instead of war because, you cannot win a military conflict against the Concord." Admiral Vasquez walked toward him, and she did not stop until she was close enough to smell his breath. "I destroyed 3 of your fortress worlds with a fleet of 40 ships," she said softly. "And my government has 10,000 ships waiting at home. Every one of them crewed by humans who remember New Brisbane and who dream of justice for our dead children." The Dreveth commander tried to hold her gaze but found that he could not. "We do not threaten you with withdrawal because we fear war," Vasquez continued. "We choose withdrawal because we are tired of dealing with species who cannot tell the difference between murder and diplomacy." She stepped back and addressed the entire chamber one final time. "The Terran Republic does not recognize the authority of the Galactic Concord, and we do not accept any terms that fail to deliver justice for our people. And from this moment forward, humanity will look after its own interests without regard for any alliance or agreement that we did not freely choose. This will destroy the galactic economy," Vethel said weakly. "That is not our problem. Millions will suffer." 14 million already suffered, Secretary Chen replied, and the Concord did not care about them. The human delegation walked out of the chamber in perfect formation, their footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. High Arbiter Tetherman stood frozen in place as he watched them go, and he remembered what the old traitor had told Ambassador Vethel about humans and their sense of justice. Now he understood what the traitor had meant. The humans had not come to negotiate, and they had not come to make threats, and they had not come to start a war. They had come to give the galaxy one chance to do the right thing, and the galaxy had failed. As the doors closed behind the human delegation, Tetherman felt something he had not experienced in 300 years of life. He felt afraid of what would happen next. And somewhere in the chamber, a young Corvaniade whispered to her superior with terror in her voice. "What do we do now?" Nobody had an answer. Galactic leaders look on in terror as humans walk away from peace talks. The human ships departed from Axiom Prime within the hour, jumping into hyperspace without ceremony or farewell. And the station fell into a strange quiet that felt like the calm before a terrible storm. Ambassador Vethel called an emergency session in the main chamber, and the delegates argued through the night about what to do next. We must mobilize our fleets immediately. The Dreveth commander roared. The humans have shown weakness by refusing to fight, and we should crush them before they have time to prepare. They destroyed 3 of your fortress worlds in 18 days. A Corvani admiral reminded him. That does not sound like weakness to me. Then what do you suggest? The Dreveth demanded. We wait and see what they actually do, High Arbiter Tethramon said. Perhaps this is only a negotiating tactic, and they will return when they realize that isolation is impossible. But the humans did not return. Instead, reports began arriving from across the galaxy, each one more alarming than the last. On the 3rd day, a Corvani trade minister burst into the chamber with panic on his face. All human merchant vessels have stopped operations, he announced. Every single one of them, across the entire galaxy, and they are not answering any communications. How many ships are we talking about? Vathal asked. Approximately 40,000. The number shocked everyone in the room because nobody had realized how dependent the galactic economy had become on human shipping. On the 5th day, a representative from the Velthari Collective arrived with even worse news. Our joint research stations have been abandoned, she said, her voice shaking. The human scientists packed their equipment and left without warning, taking all their notes and prototypes with them. What were they working on? Someone asked. A cure for the Krathful plague that killed 3 billion of my people last century, and they were close, so close to a breakthrough, and now they are gone. On the 7th day, the first economic reports came in. The Corvani Stock Exchange had crashed completely, losing 60% of its value in a single trading session, and markets across the galaxy were following the same pattern. How is this possible? Ambassador Vethel demanded. How can one species cause so much damage by simply leaving? A young economic analyst stepped forward nervously. Ambassador, humans have been integrating themselves into galactic society for 200 years. And they never asked for anything in return. They just helped wherever help was needed. And nobody kept track of how much we came to depend on them. Give me specifics. Human doctors treat diseases that no other species can cure, and they work in hospitals on over 1,000 worlds. And without them, millions of patients will die. The chamber grew quiet. Human engineers designed and maintained the reactor systems on 30% of all space stations, including Axiom Prime, and without regular maintenance, those reactors will fail within months. Human merchant ships carry 40% of all cross-sector trade, and without them goods cannot move from where they are produced to where they are needed. Human agricultural experts manage food production on hundreds of colony worlds, and without them many populations will face starvation. The analyst looked at his data tablet with despair. I could continue, Ambassador, but the summary is simple. Humans have made themselves essential to almost every aspect of galactic civilization, and they did it so quietly that nobody noticed until now. Why would they do this? Someone asked. I do not believe they planned it, the analyst said. I think they simply saw problems and fixed them, met strangers and helped them because that is apparently what humans do. And nobody thought to ask what would happen if they stopped. On the 14th day, the first systems began to fail. A space station in the Outer Rim lost life support when the human maintenance crew did not arrive for their scheduled visit, and 3,000 aliens died before rescue ships could reach them. A hospital on a Corvani colony world ran out of a critical medication that only human pharmacists knew how to produce, and the patients who needed it had no choice but to wait for death. A food processing plant on a Velthari agricultural world broke down because the human technicians who usually repaired it were gone, and an entire harvest rotted in the fields. Every day brought new disasters, new crises, new evidence of how deeply humanity had woven itself into the fabric of galactic life. On the 20th day, rebellion broke out in the Dreveth Imperium. The species that the Dreveth had conquered and enslaved over thousands of years saw their oppressors weakened and distracted, and they rose up with fury that had been building for generations. Without human trade goods and human technology and human support, the Dreveth military could not respond effectively, and their empire began to crumble from within. Ambassador Vethel watched the reports with growing horror. "We are destroying ourselves," he said quietly. High Arbiter Tethramon stood beside him, his ancient body seeming to have aged even more in the past 3 weeks. "No, Ambassador, we destroyed ourselves when we chose convenience over justice, and we simply did not realize it until the humans showed us what we had done." "What do you mean?" "The humans helped us freely and asked for nothing, and when their people were murdered, we told them that peace was more important than justice, and we expected them to accept our judgment because we were the mighty Galactic Concord. But we were only trying to maintain order. We were trying to maintain our comfortable order," Tethramon corrected. "An order built on the assumption that some lives matter more than others. And the humans looked at that assumption and decided they wanted no part of it. On the 30th day, the first request for help arrived at Earth. Species that had never spoken to humans directly were now begging for assistance, offering anything they had in exchange for food and medicine and engineers. But the Terran Republic did not respond. "What are they waiting for?" Vethal asked. Tethramon understood, even if his friend did not. "They are waiting for us to learn what we should have learned 11,000 years ago," he said. "That peace without justice is not peace at all. It is just a comfortable lie we tell ourselves while ignoring the suffering of others." And across the galaxy, species that had never thought about right and wrong began to ask themselves questions they had avoided for generations. What is peace worth if it protects murderers? What is civilization worth if it ignores the innocent? What is power worth if it cannot deliver justice? The humans had not declared war, and they had not threatened anyone, and they had not done anything except walk away. But in walking away, they had shown the galaxy something it could not unsee, and the galaxy would never be the same again. 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of the peace talks, and High Arbiter Tethramon now stood at the window of a small shuttle looking down at the blue planet called Earth. He had come alone, without guards or aides or diplomatic ceremony, because this was not an official visit, and because he was no longer sure he had the right to represent the Concord that had failed so badly. The shuttle descended through white clouds and green landscapes until it landed in a city the humans called Geneva, and Tethramon stepped out into warm sunlight that felt strange against his ancient shell. A human woman was waiting for him, and he recognized her immediately, even though they had only met once before. Admiral Helena Vasquez wore no uniform today, just simple civilian clothes, and she looked smaller somehow without the weight of military authority on her shoulders. "Hi, Arbiter," she said. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he replied. "I was not certain you would." "Neither was I," she admitted. "But you asked politely, and we humans have a weakness for good manners." She led him to a garden behind a large building, where pink flowers drifted from the trees and settled on the grass like gentle snow. Children were playing in the distance, their laughter carrying on the wind, and Tethramon watched them with something like wonder. "Human children," he said softly. "Yes, they do not seem afraid." "Why would they be?" Vasquez asked. "Because the galaxy is in chaos, and their species is at the center of it all, and yet they play as if nothing has changed." Vasquez smiled, and for the first time Tethramon saw warmth in her expression. "Human children are resilient," she said. "They trust the adults around them to keep them safe, and they focus on being children while we focus on protecting them." "Is that why you rejected our peace terms?" he asked. "To protect the children?" We rejected your terms because accepting them would have meant telling every human child that their lives do not matter as much as alien comfort. And we will never teach our children that lesson." They sat on a bench beneath the flowering trees, and Tethraman struggled to find the words he had come to say. "The Draveth Imperium has collapsed," he finally announced. "Civil war tore them apart within 3 months, and their subject species are now free for the first time in millennia." "I know," Vasquez said. "The Concord is fracturing as well, with members forming new alliances and abandoning old treaties, and many blame humanity for the chaos." "And many do not," Vasquez replied. "We have received applications for bilateral agreements from 32 species who want to build relationships with us directly, without the Concord's interference." Tethraman nodded slowly. "I have mediated disputes for 300 years, he said, "and I believe I understood how civilizations work, but I did not understand humans." "No," Vasquez agreed. "You did not. You did not fight us. You did not threaten us. You did not do anything except leave. And in leaving, you showed us how much we needed you and how little we deserved you." The Admiral watched the children playing, and her expression became thoughtful. "We did not do it to teach anyone a lesson," she said quietly. "We walked away because staying would have meant accepting that 14 million dead civilians were just the cost of peace. And we could not accept that. We are not built to accept that. What are humans built for, Admiral?" She considered the question for a long moment. "Stubbornness, mostly," she finally said. "We are very good at refusing to accept things as they are, even when everyone tells us we should give up." "The galaxy spent 11,000 years learning to compromise," Tethraman observed. "And humanity spent 11,000 years learning to dig in our heels," Vasquez replied with a small smile. "It turns out the galaxy needed both approaches. And nobody realized it until we showed them what happens when compromise goes too far." Tethraman rose from the bench and stood facing her. "The Concord will offer new terms," he said. "Real accountability for what happened at New Brisbane, justice for the 14 million who died, and guarantees that nothing like it will ever happen again." "I know," Vasquez said. "We have been waiting." "You knew this would happen?" he asked with surprise. "We hoped it would," she corrected, "which is not the same thing at all. How could you hope for something so uncertain?" The Admiral stood and looked up at the sky, where faint stars were just becoming visible in the evening light. "That is the other thing humans are good at," she said, "hoping even when it seems foolish. Even when the numbers do not support it, even when everyone else has given up. We keep hoping because we cannot help ourselves." Tethraman bowed, a human gesture he had learned specifically for this meeting. "Then perhaps there is hope for the galaxy as well," he said. "There always was," Vasquez replied. "We just needed to remind you of it." She walked with him back to his shuttle, and before he boarded, she touched his arm gently. "High Arbiter, when the Concord sends its new terms, make sure they include one specific item." "What is that?" "The former Draveth commander, the one who ordered the attack on New Brisbane. He escaped when the Imperium collapsed, and we want him found and delivered to Earth to stand trial for his crimes." "That may be difficult," Tethraman said. "Justice often is," Vasquez replied. "But it matters anyway." The old insectoid climbed into his shuttle and looked back at the Admiral one last time. "You could have destroyed us," he said. "You could have used your military power to conquer the galaxy while we were weak, and nobody could have stopped you." "Yes," Vasquez agreed. "Why did you not?" She smiled, and this time the smile was genuine. "Because we do not want to rule the galaxy, High Arbiter. We just want to live in it alongside neighbors who understand that every life has value, and that justice matters more than convenience. And if the galaxy cannot learn that lesson, then we will wait until it does, however long that takes, because humans are patient when we need to be, and we never give up on things that matter. The shuttle lifted off and rose into the darkening sky, and Admiral Vasquez watched it go until it was just a speck among the stars. Behind her, the children had stopped playing and were being called home by their parents, their voices mixing with the sound of wind through the flowering trees. She thought about the future, about all the challenges that still lay ahead, and about the 14 million people who had died on New Brisbane, whose memory had started all of this. "We did it," she whispered to them, to all of them, to the dead and the living and the children who would inherit whatever galaxy emerged from this crisis. "We did it, and we did not have to become monsters to do it." The stars seemed a little brighter now, a little closer, a little more like home. And somewhere across the galaxy, species that had never believed in hope were learning to believe again.